Hey everyone, in this tutorial we'll cover basic data types in Python. We'll talk about comments in Python, then we'll move on to textual data such as strings, numbers such as integers and floats, and at the end we'll talk briefly about Boolean values. So let's get into it. Let's start with comments. Essentially, comments are used to describe your code. Anything following a hash sign is a comment and will not be run by Python. So if I go into this cell and run it, you can see nothing is output because it's just a comment. You'll see that you can also have comments in the same line as you have code. So here on the left side, we have some code, 1 + 2. And on the right side, you can see a hashtag and an inline. It's called an inline comment, essentially. Anything after the hashtag or the hash symbol won't be run by Python. So you can see that it's a nice way of describing your code on the same line as the code itself. You can also write multi-line comments with 3 double quotes, such as here, or 3 single quotes, such as here. This is very handy when you want to describe a lot of things. For example, for a function, you want to describe all the different parameters for the function. As a beginner, you won't be using this very often, but it's very good to know that it exists. Essentially, you have 3 double quotes here at the top, 3 double quotes to finish the multi-line comment at the bottom. And you can see in this case, you actually do get something output. And this is because this multi-line comment is a special type of comment in Python that we don't need to worry about right now. So let's move on to basic data types. First, we'll talk about strings. So strings are textual data. We use them to represent words or any textual information, such as characters, words, or sentences. We can use single quotes or double quotes to make a string. So this here is a string. You can see that we start with opening the string with a double quote and finishing it with a double quote. And we can also use a single quote and a single quote to end our string. And if we run this cell, you can see that we get both of these printed out as proper strings in Python. Well, what if we want to put the following into a string, something where you have some sort of possessive word with an apostrophe in it? Well, you can see here that Python will probably see that this here is a string because we've opened with a single quote and finished with a single quote. And then you can see that it's a different color. Maybe it thinks it's some sort of variable. And then we have another quote at the end, which we intend to be the end of the string, but Python will just not understand what's going on here. And in fact, we do get some sort of syntax error here. So instead, we use single quotes and double quotes together. And this is a very nice and easy way of making strings very clear. So you can see on the outside, we have double quotes, and on the inside, we have single quotes. So if you run this, we in fact get our message out, our string. We can also use a special escape character, this backslash here, to escape any, basically this will escape the next character. So we can use our single quotes everywhere, and we can escape the possessive apostrophe here in the middle, the single quote. And you'll see that if we run this, we get the exact same output as we did before. However, I wouldn't recommend using this if you can use this method up here, because it's just not as clean and can sometimes be confusing for beginners. So that's the strings. That's all they are essentially. And you can use Unicode characters, and you can use other things like that in Python with no problem using strings. So let's move on to numbers. So first, let's talk about integers and floats, and then we'll talk about Boolean values. So they are essentially exactly what you would think they are. So an integer is something without a decimal point. If we run this, we can see we get the output of an integer here. And then a floating point number is just something with a decimal point. We can work with these together. You can see that here we have 3 plus 3.14, and we can get our output here where we've added them together. So you can work with these two things together. How do you add and divide things like this in Python? Well, I have a short description here of each one. They're pretty much exactly what you would think. Plus is addition, minus is subtraction. A star sign is multiplication. We have a forward slash for division, double forward slash for division, but does not include the remainder. And we have examples of all of these below. So the first three here are exactly what you might expect. We have plus, minus, and multiplication. But then we have some of these kind of special operations here. So the first one, we get a division, 9 divided by 4. Then we get 9 divided by 4, but you ignore the remainder. Then we get 9 divided by 4, but you only get the remainder. So this percent sign means you only get the remainder. And then the double star sign means that you do 9 to the power of 4. Yeah, so if we multiply this out, or just, sorry, run the code rather, we can see that we got division here, division, and ignore the remainder. Division, but it only took the remainder. So 9 divided by 4 goes in twice, remainder 1. And then 9 to the power of 4 here at the end. So that's essentially numbers in Python. They're very easy to work with, and there's nothing more that you have to do except exactly what we've shown here. Finally, let's talk about Boolean values. So Boolean values are true and false with capital T and capital F in Python. So if we run this cell here, we can see that it outputs true and false as actual objects in Python. Notice that these aren't strings. There's no quotes here encapsulating true or false. These are actual Python objects. We can also see that 1 and 0 are true and false respectively. So 1 is equal to true here and 0 is equal to false. And these are both evaluated to true in Python because 1 is indeed equal to true and 0 is equal to false. Well, what happens when we try true is equal to false? Well, we'll get false because they're not equal, which is quite obvious, I guess. And what about adding Booleans together? So true plus true, you might have an idea what this will output. Print true plus 5 and true plus 5.14, this floating point number here. And if we run this cell, we can see we get true plus true is equal to 2 because it's 1 plus 1. We get 1 plus 6 and then 1 plus 5.45. So you can see that you can start mixing up Booleans and integers and numbers and things like this and working with them all together. So quickly, I have a blurb here at the end about when to use each data type. So strings are to be used when you want to use a character, a word, or a sentence. Integers should be used when you want to use a number, of course, and Boolean values, because they're very quick, can be very useful for speed. And if your data just has values or true or false, or you want to create some sort of mask over an array. So essentially, that was the basic data types of Python. We have further tutorials on other data types, and in the future, there will be more advanced tutorials on these data types as well.